What's going on, guys? Ryan Nelson here, and today we're taking a look at the GoPro Hero 6 versus the GoPro Hero 7. When the 7 came out, a lot of people were raving about it, and they're like, it's got this feature which is amazing, and the mic is amazing, and the stabilization is so good, and it's such an upgrade. So I was really curious for myself, so I got the 7 to check it out to see how it actually compares up against the 6. Let's dive right in and take a look. Okay, to start off with, both of these cameras are the same size. They both take the same battery, both take the same type of SD card, and they both fit in the same case, and they both take the same filters. So size-wise, battery-wise, they're exactly the same. This one's just gray, and this one's black. And just in case you're wondering, these are both the Hero 6 Black and the Hero 7 Black. So internally on these two cameras, the frame rates and the resolutions of both of these are pretty much the same, and I'll just put a list over here of the frame rates and resolutions of which each of these cameras shoot at, because they're pretty much the same, maybe a little difference here or there. And then down below in the description, I'll list out the frame rate, the resolution, and the stabilization for each camera, because they're slightly different. Down below in the description, check that out. So today mainly I'm talking about time warp, time lapse, and stabilization of each of these cameras. And then we're going to take a little look and see which one works better, and if you can pull the same stabilization from the 7 and get that on the 6. Let's take a look. Okay, so if you're looking at both of these and you want to do a time lapse, on the 6 you have a time lapse video, a time lapse photo, and then a night lapse photo. And on the 7 you have a time warp video, time lapse photo, and a nighttime time lapse photo. So the difference here is the time lapse video on the 7 turned into the time warp video. What does that mean for you? That means you just get a better stabilization with your time lapse video. So let's take a look at a couple examples here. By the way, if you're doing time lapse photo, no stabilization whatsoever. So you need to be on a tripod or somewhere stable if you're doing time-lapse photo. So let's take a look at a few examples of the time-lapse video versus the time warp video. So taking a look at this first example on the GoPro Hero 6, you can tell with the time-lapse video there is zero stabilization whatsoever. And then when we move to the Hero 7 on time warp video, you can see that that is a lot smoother. I mean, you're getting just some pretty smooth motion on that. By the way, that was set for a 10x speed on the time warp video. Moving on to the next example, what I did here was shoot the GoPro Hero 6 on a 4K 24 with the stabilization on, and then I took the rate stretch tool and matched the speed of the 15x time warp video on the GoPro 7. So let's take a look at the 6 first. As you can see, it's a little shaky, but it's a lot smoother than the time-lapse video. Now let's take a look at the 7. The 7 is definitely much smoother. You see a couple of movements here and there, but overall it's a very, very smooth video. Now this next one was kind of a twofold. It was the same, where the 6 was shot on 4K 24 with stabilization on, used the rate stretch tool to speed it up, and then the time warp on the 7, but it was also more of a dynamic range and color test between the two. So let's take a look at that. So this first one was the GoPro Hero 6 with stabilization on plus a warp stabilizer, and then this is the GoPro 7 with no warp stabilizer. The one big thing I noticed with this was the warp stabilizer cropped in a lot on the 6 versus the framing of the 7. After taking a look at those examples, can you pull off a hyper smooth stabilization on a 6? Yes, with a combination of shooting it in video instead of time lapse, and then bringing it in post and using a warp stabilizer. Yes, I think you can do this. However, that does come at the sacrifice of a lot more space. You're gonna eat up a lot more chip space, a lot more hard drive space shooting that much video, and then compressing it down into a time lapse instead of shooting the time warp on the 7. Another thing I did notice on both of these cameras, so it's not a plus or a minus for either one, is you really can't set your colors, you can't set your white balance, you can't do anything while shooting on the time lapse or time warp video. Now you can, however, set your auto white balance or manual white balance, and on both of these cameras you can set your colors to flat while you're shooting video, but not time-lapse video or time-lapse time warp. And while we're speaking of file sizes, if you're comparing a straight 4K video and a 4K video, or a 1080 and 1080 on both of these, the file sizes on the 7 are slightly smaller, not much at all, but they are slightly smaller, so there's probably a better compression with those. So there's a couple more tests that I want to do with this while I have them. One is with the stabilization, and another one is the microphone. Now, I've heard raving reviews about how good the microphone is on the 7, and I just wanted to test it out for myself, so let's go do that. So this is on 4K 24 wide. I'm on a fairly quiet city street downtown, but there's cars driving by, there's airplanes flying overhead, and I may be holding the 6 over the microphone. But this is just a test on how well the microphones do on both of these cameras. I just wanted to interrupt myself real quick and say, yes, I know this now. The 7 was way blown out compared to the 6. I don't know why. I don't know why it did it just in this situation, but that's the way it is. Okay, back to what I was saying. All right, next test. All right, so this is with 1080, 24 frames a second, linear mode, hyper smooth on the 7, standard stabilization on the 6. What's the difference here? I don't know. I can't tell. The screens are on the other side of these things and I can't see them. But I'm gonna get back to the computer, see what they look like. You tell me. As of right now, I think the colors on the 7, they're much flatter, so maybe they're easier to deal with. Just looking at the back of the camera. Haven't really tested them both out yet. But the real test with the stabilization, and I think the wind's coming, so we're gonna test that too. But the real test with the stabilization that I really wanna do is get both of these on a mountain bike, on the mountain, and really see what each of these can do. So let's do that first. Now, just as a baseline, here is the GoPro Hero 6 on 4K 60 with no stabilization. Clearly, this is really bumpy, really shaky, and you're probably not gonna wanna use it. Then if we look at the GoPro 7 at 4K 60 with standard stabilization, it's not so bad. It's pretty smooth, actually. And then if we go back to the Hero 6 at 4K 24, we get a pretty smooth ride. It's definitely not hard on the eyes. It's a little shaky, but it's also a really chunky trail. So then if we go back to the GoPro Hero 7 at 4K 24 with hyper smooth stabilization, it's pretty buttery. I mean, it's pretty silky smooth here, so it's looking really good. So just to give you guys a little bit of perspective, and I hope you can hear me through all this wind, but here is what I was just riding down. It's a little chunky, it's a little hard. I almost bit it a few times, but it's all in the name of camera science and letting you guys know what you actually need to spend your money on, or what you may want to spend your money on. You don't need any of this stuff. Just saying, you don't really need this, but it's fun to do, isn't it? It's so much fun. All right, back to the studio. So overall, I think with the stabilization, the hyper smooth is really good. It adds quite a bit of creaminess to it, if you want to put it that way, but is it absolutely necessary? Not sure. For a lot of things you're going to be doing, you could probably just add a warp stabilizer in post and get pretty much the same effect. Now, a few other quick tricks or tips that I've found with the GoPro 7. If you want to format the card, it's a little buried. First, you have to open up your menu, go to Preferences, scroll all the way down to Reset, and then your first option is Format SD card. It took me a while to find that. I hope that helps. And the other issue I've had sometimes when I'm going from 1080 back to 4K 24 is that it doesn't allow for stabilization. A little workaround for that is hit the 16:9 button and then hit the 4:3 button to put you back into 16:9, hit 4K, 24, and there's your hyper smooth stabilization. I don't know why it does that, but if it shows up with stabilization not supported, just swap 16:9 to 4:3 and then go back to 16:9, and your stabilization should be supported then. So the stabilization on the 7 is clearly better than the 6. Is it that much better? Not so sure about that, but the microphone is better. I think the colors are better when you're able to shoot in that flat profile. You don't get those weird, bluey, really kind of oversaturated GoPro look that everybody's been used to for a long time. It gives you a little bit more natural, flat colors that should give you a little bit more flexibility to edit in post-production. So for all of these shots, when I could set them, it was set to auto shutter speed. It was set to 4500 white balance, medium sharpness, and then a flat color profile. Now, like I said earlier, a lot of those you can't set when you're doing time lapse or time warp, so it is what it is there, and I just deal with it. While I was out shooting, I found the battery life on both of these cameras was pretty comparable. I think they were always within 1% of each other. And by the way, I was also using some aftermarket batteries that I found on Amazon. I'll link those below. It came in a 2-pack of batteries and a charger. So far, they're working out really well, and they are Aluki. I'm not really sure. How do you say that? How do you say that? I don't know, but they're durable too. So go ahead and check those out if you want some extra batteries for your GoPro. Both of these are really, really fine pieces of tech. If you've got the 6, I don't know, maybe it's worth it to go up to the 7. If you want to do hyperlapse, it's a really good incentive to do it. If you're gonna vlog with it and no external microphone, definitely the 7 is gonna be worth it because that mic is amazing. Still, you're gonna want some sort of wind buff for it. But overall, I think you're gonna be happy with either one of these. So it's your choice. Pick which camera is best for you and let me know which one you pick. Let me know which one you like. I'd love to hear. All right, guys, really appreciate you checking this out. If this helps you out in any way, hit that thumbs up button down there. Drop a comment down there in the comments, and then hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.